Hello everybody, welcome to Story Time. The last week of Tales. Now again this week I'm afraid I'm going to have to record these for you. These have all been pre-recorded some little time back in the past rather than do them live this week. But I've got three cracking tales to share with you this week, and starting off with today's, which is all about a little boy. Let me describe him to you. This little boy was 10 years old. He was a happy little boy, always smiling. He had bright red rosy cheeks, and he liked food. Boy, did he like food. He was a big lad, and with his short brown hair and his great round shape, he resembled a giant conker. So much so that his siblings, his brothers and sisters, gave him the nickname Chestnut. He ate a lot. At mealtimes, he'd have 3 courses. For starters, he might have a bowl of broth and lots of bread. A big dinner for his main course. And for dessert, there was always room for dessert. He might have a big slice of chocolate fudge cake and mountains of ice cream. Now, boys and girls, I don't know about you, but when I've had 3 courses, I'm absolutely stuffed afterwards. I can't eat any more. But Chestnut always had room for a little more, for his favourite food. There were always a few corners left to fill with cheese. He loved cheese. He couldn't get enough. It was his favourite food. But his grown-ups warned him. They said, "You should eat more carefully. And you cheddar listen to us, otherwise you'll be in trouble." If there are any grown-ups listening to this story, and you might be wondering, I wonder how many cheese puns Mr. Kelly is going to squeeze into the story. Well, there's quite a few coming. He loved cheese. It was his favourite, and he couldn't get enough. One night, Chestnut was lying in bed, having some marvellous cheese dreams. He lay there snoring lightly and smiling. After all, sweet dreams are made of cheese. As he lay there, suddenly something strange happened. He was thinking he could see himself lying there in the bed. Was he awake, or was he still dreaming? There he was in his bedroom, and all of a sudden as he looked, he noticed the window slide open, and in through the window flew some fairies. He recognised the fairy folk straight away. They flew in through his bedroom and landed on his chest and looked at him and pointed. And they said, "Hey, Chestnut, you've got to come with us tonight. We're going to have a great party. There'll be singing and dancing. It's going to be great fun. You have to come along." Chestnut was a little bit wary because he knew about the fairy folk. He knew that they were not to be trusted, and sometimes they got up to mischief. But then they said, "Look, there'll be loads of food, and there'll be cheese. There'll be more cheese than you've ever seen in your life. The best cheese, all for you." Well, that was it. He'd been persuaded. So they took him by the hands, and using their magical powers, they helped him to fly out of the bed. They drifted across the bedroom, out of the window, and then down over the garden, into the trees, into the woods, and then they landed on the grass, in the middle of a fairy ring. Boys and girls, if you don't know what a fairy ring is, it's a ring of toadstools. Now, these are special places where humans aren't allowed to go unless the fairies invite you in. Well, Chestnut had been invited, so they landed in the fairy ring and the party started. And indeed, there was much merriment. There was singing and laughter and dancing, and all the fairies grabbed Chestnut up and he spun and reeled around with the dancers. The quickest music. The pipers piped, the fiddlers fiddled. They were having a wonderful time. But then, music to his ears. The call came for the food. Great tables full of food. And then the cheese came. "You just sit there," they said. "You just sit there, and we'll bring the cheese to you." So Chestnut sat, and the fairies came flying out from all different places. They brought all of his favourites. There was Cheddar and Cheshire. There was Lancashire and Wensleydale. And they piled it down in front of him. And he started straight away, stuffing the cheese into his mouth. He couldn't get enough. More and more he put in. And more the fairies kept bringing the cheese, piling it up. Some of the cheeses were like bricks, big cuboid bricks. Some were in rounds. And the fairies rolled them out from behind the trees. They piled them up. Now there was Double Gloucester and Red Leicester and Stilton and Caerphilly. All of these cheeses coming out. He kept eating as much as he could, but there was too much, and they kept bringing more and more. But he didn't like to say no. He didn't want to hurt their feelings, and he was a polite boy. He always said his cheeses and thank yous. More cheese came, and now the fairies tried to help him eat it. They took bits of cheese and tried to stuff them into Chestnut's mouth, as they forced more and more cheese in. He could feel himself getting bigger and bigger, his stomach expanding as he ate more and more cheese. The cheese that the fairies couldn't squash into his mouth, they built up in great towers, a great wall of cheese, getting higher and higher above him. Now they brought Edam cheese and Brie and Gorgonzola and Emmental. All the cheeses coming, and still they tried to squash the cheeses into his mouth. Poor Chestnut, he couldn't take any more. He realised now that these fairies were being a little bit naughty. They were up to no gooder, and he was getting fed up with it. I can't take any more, he said. No more cheese. I can't bear it. But they kept bringing more and more. Now there was mozzarella cheese coming, and there was all sorts of cheese coming, every cheese you can imagine. Parmigiano was coming, ricotta, all the cheeses you can imagine, piling higher and higher. Still the fairy stuffed the cheese into his mouth. He thought he was going to pop, and then he saw the cheese wall starting to shake, and all of a sudden it swayed, and he saw the cheeses tumbling down, and they started to fall on his head. He was worried he was going to get crushed under a mountain of cheese, and then all of a sudden he felt a cool breeze across his face. He opened his eyes and blinked in the bright morning sun. The fairies and the cheese had gone. There he was lying in the wet grass. Oh, he wiped the sweat from his brow. Dear me, what just happened? Was that real? Did that really happen? Or was it a terrible, terrible dream? He thought it must have been. But how did he get out there? How has he found himself outside in the grass? Oh, what an awful night's sleep, he thought. Oh, what's that on my back? I must have slept on a big stone, he thought. And he put his hand behind his back and pulled out, not a stone, but a great lump of cheese. Well, boys and girls, after that incident, Chestnut was a little wiser and a little less greedy in his ways. And I think it'll come to you as no surprise to hear that from that day on, he very much lost his appetite for cheese. Well, there you go, that's a story of cheese. And Chestnut, who I think was a little bit greedy in the end, wasn't he? It's nice to have things that you like, but you shouldn't have too much of things, I think. Well, there you go, that's today's story. Now, if you want to join me tomorrow, I'm going to tell you an old English folk tale. It's one I'm very excited about sharing with you because I haven't told it before. And in fact, I've only heard the story quite recently. It's called The Apple Tree Man. And that's going to be our second last story, the penultimate story. So come and join me tomorrow for that if you like. That's it for now. So take care of yourselves and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.